Dan Marino is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL, and just football in general. After playing the University of Pittsburgh, he ended up leading them to a Sugar Bowl win in his junior year, but after a slight plummet in his senior year, his selection status in the 1983 NFL Draft went down, as he was drafted in the first round still, but picked 27 by the Miami Dolphins, where he would go on to be their franchise quarterback for almost 20 years and had multiple great seasons, the most notable being his sophomore year in 1984, where he won the NFL MVP award by leading the Dolphins to a 14-2 record and being the first QB in NFL history to pass for over 5,000 yards and throwing a then NFL record 48 touchdowns, a record that would not be broken for 20 years. He ended up leading the Dolphins to the Super Bowl that year, but he lost 38-16 against Joe Montana in the 49ers. After making the playoffs the year after, he ended up going on a slight dip in performance for the next few years before going back on track for the rest of the 90s. But all of those accolades aren't what we're going to be focusing on today. In fact, we are going to be focusing on one game entirely in Dan Marino's career, and unfortunately, it's not a great one. We've seen athletes in professional sports such as Michael Jordan in basketball.
Jordan, open, Chicago with the lead!
Or Raymond Bork in hockey.
2 years, Raymond Bork!
Go out on top in their final game. But the way Dan Marino's NFL career ended is one of the most sad and depressing ways I have ever seen, and I am going to show you how this is the worst way for an NFL player to go out, and one of the worst ways, if not the worst way for any athlete to go out. So let's get into it. Heading into the 1999 season, Dan Marino was coming off 2 straight playoff berths, which included a 10-6 record the previous year, and it looked to be business as usual as he went on to win Offensive Player of the Week in Week 1 against the defending Super Bowl champions for the last 2 years, Denver Broncos, and he ended up winning it again in Week 4 by throwing for 393 yards and 2 touchdowns against Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts. But in just the next game, he would be sidelined with a shoulder injury that would keep him off the field for the next 5 weeks. And things looked bleak with Damon Huard taking over as quarterback. But they ended up winning 4 of those 5 games. But when Marino came back, they just lost multiple games. They ended up losing 3 straight, but a win against the San Diego Chargers kept them in the playoff hunt as they ended up ending the season with a 9-7 record and barely made the playoffs. The Seahawks would be hosting the Dolphins for the NFL Wildcard, and it was a tightly contested game for the entirety of it. But Dan Marino was able to mount a strong 85-yard drive midway through the fourth quarter that put them up 20-13. But what iced the game was a strong interception by Terrell Buckley at the end of the fourth quarter.
Immediately following this game, except on the West Coast. Kitna with time, throws, near side, picked off! Terrell Buckley.
And John Kitna, not a bad decision, not even a bad throw. You got to take chances in these situations. But Terrell Buckley comes up.
The Dolphins would go on to be the only team on the road to win in the wild card, as they would have to travel to Jacksonville now to face them in the divisional round.
And with a knee, that will do it.
Fans were looking forward to this matchup. The upstart Jaguars, only coming into the NFL just a few years before having the best record in the AFC at 14-2, and the Dolphins, of course, barely making the playoffs. The Jaguars were favorites in this game, but Jimmy Johnson and Dan Marino knew that they had to stop the big plays. The Jaguars, of course, had Mark Brunell. They had Jimmy Smith as a great receiver, and Fred Taylor was really young and was looking to do really well. And of course, even though the Dolphins were kind of the underdogs, people knew that with Dan Marino at quarterback, anything could really happen. The Jaguars and their explosive offense won the coin toss, and the Miami defense was about to set sail with Patrick Surtain leading the way to block those 3 aforementioned players. But after the kickoff, Miami struggled initially until one of those big players stepped up for Jacksonville, and it all went downhill for Miami from there.
Three wide receiver set. Smith comes wide left. And press coverage by the Dolphins. Here's Brunell. Quick setup. Slant pattern. Jimmy Smith. He's got opening room. To the 40. Down to the 25. And somersaulted at the 23-yard line. Patrick Surtain. A 41-yard gain.
This completely changed the momentum early in the game, and Brunell and Jimmy Smith would go on to connect for a touchdown soon after. You may be thinking that since it's early in the game that I'm sounding hyperbolic, but I'm not.
Smith got away with a pretty good shove on Brock Marion.
Dan Marino opens with three wide receivers on first down, and he will throw. Mild play action goes left, intercepted by Aaron Beasley. Picked off by Beasley, and the problems persist for Dan Marino. How about that?
Wow, problems persist. This guy knows exactly what I'm talking about. And the Jaguars would go on to score a field goal soon after to make it 10-0. The Dolphins would go 3 and out right after. And then the Jaguars offense decided to humiliate the Miami defense.
Plays, either denying them or watching them happen to him. But he knows he doesn't have a big play team, and Jacksonville does.
Draw play. Taylor skips 2 tackles. Right, and here we go.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Brock Marion chasing. Brock Marion still chasing. Gets help from Smith. Touchdown. No flags. A 90-yard run.
Could have sworn we were just talking about big plays.
Wow, 90-yard touchdown. Fred Taylor, you absolute monster. We had barely seen Dan Marino this entire game. And, how could it get any worse? They somehow found a way to make it worse.
Every time the Dolphins have taken many chances this year, it's blown up in their face.
Look at the disparity in yardage. 171-yard difference. Marino hit from the backside. Fumble the ball.
Oh, Lord, Jacksonville has it. And this ball is live. This is still live.
Tony Brackens.
They haven't blown a whistle yet.
No. And finally, he rumbles toward the end zone.
That's a touchdown. Oh,
Don't kill me. Please. I'll never tell anyone, I swear. He's the one you want. Kill him.
No, kill him.
No, kill him.
Kill him.
He held the
He's the
ball,
detective.
remember? Come on, look at the guy.
Try, baby. Jock. Wimp. Musclehead. Shut up!
What was that? Did you just see that? How did that just happen? How in the world does that happen? I don't even know how to explain that. What? All right, let's just get out. Now it's 24-0. Since I haven't shown any of Dan Marino playing, let's just look at this drive and see what happens.
Urged into the end zone by his teammates.
But what a lapse of concentration by Miami, Vern. Talk about going to sleep.
Joel Smengi, number 99, and Carnell Lake, number 37. 41-yard pass to set up the first touchdown. Then Marino intercepted on his first play. A 90-yard run following the punt. And then Brackens strips Marino of the ball and runs it in for the touchdown. Second down, 11.
Tony Brackens initially didn't realize what he was doing, Vern, that the play was still alive. Luckily, a lot of his teammates, Bryce popping up. Well, that's a good look at why Tony Brackens is going to his first Pro Bowl this year.
Pride of Fairfield, Texas, from the University of. And Marino out of the shotgun on 3rd and 8. Here comes the blitz. Marino moves to his left, pulls up, fires it incomplete. Beasley covering Aronde Gadsden.
Wow, to see that the Jaguars were once the number 1 team in the AFC is phenomenal. And we're seeing it firsthand. They were just completely obliterating the Miami squad on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. But their offense was making the explosive plays at the same time. Dan Marino's receivers just couldn't get open and don't even think about running the ball. It wasn't doing anything there. And as the first quarter wound to a close, the Jaguars didn't lose any steam.
As Tony Bracken sacked Marino, fumbled, caused the fumble, picked it up and ran it in. Screen pass. Look at this. Nobody within 15 yards. Another missed tackle. Another missed tackle. It's become a mantra. That is a touchdown.
What a tremendous play by Fred Taylor. What an embarrassment for the Miami Dolphins. He's not only adding to his own team, but he's also wreaking a little havoc in the AFC Central at the same time. Whoa,
Bobbles it, it's blocked.
Man, they got the pump block too. They're playing on rookie difficulty, man.
Chamblin, number 23, as Hutton bobbled the snap, came through to block it. With the bad knee in his 4th year from Dartmouth. Here's the handoff to James Stewart. Got room. He's going to stroll in and score. Flag in the end zone. I am thunderstruck.
They might flag Miami for playing so horribly on defense.
Wow, even the broadcasters are roasting Miami's defense. The Jaguars head coach knew what was up, and after that, took out Mark Brunell for the rest of the game and put backup Jay Fiedler in.
Block punts, now you see a drop ball. Marino 0 for 6.
And the guy that you would think...
Dang, no pass completions. That's not good.
Can't hold on to that ball.
You know, it's hard to think of descriptions that don't seem unkind. Because this has been a disaster. If you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, it's been the best thing you've ever seen. But Miami has just done everything wrong. Out of the shotgun, blitz coming. Deep left side, intercepted by Beasley.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of, like, you know when you're playing Madden and you play with the highest ranked team and you go against the lowest ranked team and you're playing on rookie difficulty? This is what it's like. Unfortunately, the Dolphins are on the rookie end of this stick. But they had a bit of upside as Dan Marino finally got his first pass completion. And it was slow, but with most of the Jaguars being backups now on the field, Jay Fiedler couldn't really bring him up the field too much, and the Jaguars ended up missing a 39-yard field goal. And even though Dan Marino did fumble again, it was starting to look like things could go a little bit in the Dolphins' direction. I mean, what am I kidding? All the Miami fans were just looking for any points just to get them out of the zero. And then the Jaguars did score another field goal to make it 41-0. And all Miami fans were looking for was just a simple sign that would bring their old Dan Marino back.
1:47 to go before halftime. Blitz coming. Marino. A slant pattern to the 33-yard line. A playoff game between Minnesota and St. Louis. This one to Rob Conrad out of the back.
Isaac Bruce leads the football team there with Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk. That is the most explosive team in football, and they are not a fluke.
Brackens from the outside. Marino finds Conrad. He slips out of the tackle.
Miami fans would end up getting their wish on the drive right before the end of the first half, as Dan Marino and the Dolphins would end up marching down the field with quick passes that weren't for too many yards and great clock management by the team, as they would take their second timeout just under the 30-second mark and ended up getting all the way down to the 20-yard line on a 10-yard pass completion to Stanley Pritchett. As they would take their third and final timeout, they lost their first one after losing a challenge. And they decided to not just go for a field goal. They decided to just go for gold.
Blitz again. Right corner, double coverage. And this one is caught. Touchdown. Aronde Gadsden goes up and makes the grab. 20 yards. Fernando Bryant defending.
Well, double coverage. And Dan took a chance and jammed.
This would go on to be the last moment, the last positive hurrah for Dan Marino. The final touchdown he ever threw in the NFL, made it 41-7 at halftime, and they got the ball in the beginning of the third quarter. But unfortunately, the footage I'm looking at doesn't have this particular moment, but he threw a pass completion to J.J. Johnson for 4 yards, and that would go on to be the final pass completion he ever made in the league. He ended up throwing another pass afterward that was incomplete to O.J. McDuffie, and that was it. He never attempted another pass because the Jaguars dealt a death blow to his NFL career.
And when a guy like Mark Brunell says, you know what, he really, over the last couple of years, has been our MVP, lofty praise.
On 3rd and 2, deep left side, man open. There he goes, Jimmy Smith. No flags. Touchdown, my Jacksonville. Fiedler to Smith. The route continues.
After this, the Dolphins would bench Dan Marino in favor of backup quarterback Damon Huard just to get him some playing time. And Huard, honestly, his game was mediocre. He didn't really have any notable moments. He only had 2 pass completions longer than 10 yards. He didn't throw a pick. He was sacked a few times. Not really anything notable to show you. But it doesn't even matter because the Jaguars just kept putting it on.
Watching the game today, and he's supposed to return back to Jacksonville tomorrow.
3rd and 5. Fiedler deep left side again. There's a collision.
That's a
and
touchdown.
A catch. Alvis Wooded. First of the year for number 86.
You know, I'm assuming most people watching this game on TV, if they weren't a Jacksonville fan, that they already switched the channel or shut it off after I think the Jaguars hit maybe 38 or so. Unfortunately, the best part of the entire game actually happened after this touchdown where the sprinklers literally came on the end zone. That was the best part of the entire game. I'm not even joking.
Easy for you to say.
No.
Take a look at the large margins.
Carefully.
Chicago, Washington back in 1940 still stands out. 73 to scratch. The sprinklers have come on the football field.
Perfect.
This is unbelievable. The automatic sprinkler system has come on the goal line.
Absolutely perfect.
Somehow,
The smoke started it.
I don't know if the concussion from the aerial bombs.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
This is, there they got him turned off. Well, Jimmy, you have seen it all now.
That was funny. But don't let that make you think that the Jaguars are going to stop because of sprinklers and a wet end zone.
Autry Denson is the running back. Deep man in the eye. Shifting defense. Hardy comes on the near side. And they hand it to Denson, who gets some fumble. Loose ball. And Jacksonville has it.
I think if Jimmy had a white flag, he'd be waving it.
Howard is the deep back.
Are they really going for a score in the 60s? I can't comprehend this.
Howard, left side. Touchdown, Jacksonville. Touchdown, Jacksonville. I swear we saw the film of the Chicago-Washington game, 73-0 run at halftime. I never figured we'd make reference back to it again.
Power football right off the left side, whether Tony Baselli is there or not. Tom Coughlin calls the same play, and that's just great power. That is just wonderful power by Chris Howard as he drags Zach Thomas right into the end zone.
Mike Hollis with the extra point.
I've been working the NFL, Vern, and played. I've never seen a game this out of control. I can't recall. It is 62-7.
Fortunately for the Dolphins, the Jaguars wouldn't hit the end zone anymore, as the clocks would tick down to zero in what was the most lopsided postseason game in the history of the NFL in its modern era. The Jaguars had over 500 yards of offense. Mark Brunell had over 100 of those yards passing on just 5 pass completions. Jay Fiedler had over 170 yards on 7 pass completions. Fred Taylor ran for over 130 yards and a touchdown. Jimmy Smith had over 135 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Dan Marino in his final game went 11 for 25 for 95 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, and 2 fumbles. Damon Heward went 5 for 16 for 46 yards. He was sacked 3 times, and he also fumbled. Shout out to that Jaguars defense. Remember, they just completely pounded them. We thought Super Bowl 59 was lopsided. If you want to see a lopsided game, check out this game. It is absolutely insane. And this game aroused questions as to whether Jimmy Johnson and Dan Marino would come back. Of course, we now know they never did. This is the saddest thing I've ever seen. Dan Marino, a Hall of Famer, what an absolute legend he was. The person that claims that he could throw for over 6,000 yards and 60 touchdowns in the modern day NFL went out not even with a whimper. He went out without even a breath. He was choked to death in this game. I feel bad. One of the saddest things I've ever seen. Forget the shout out only on the Jaguars defense. Shout out to their offense too. Remember, the defense of Miami, they had Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison, 2 all-time great players on defense. They just found a way to get through everybody. And that's basically just the end of Dan Marino's career. The player everyone looks at now in the NFL as the greatest player to never win a Super Bowl. He's basically the Mark Martin of the NFL. The greatest player to never win a championship is also the player to have the worst outing to an NFL career. I hope you guys like this video. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.